talking about the long term, we need to be able to have our different facilities also climate approved. Many of the power plants, the refineries, are located near the shore. And one of the impacts of climate change, of course, increase in seawater level. And if they increase them to about 1 meter, as many of the international experts are saying, then they could impact many of our facilities. Increase in temperature is also going to impact the system, because the cooling water is actually being derived from the sea or from the lake or the main water source where the different facilities are located. And if the ambient temperature has increased, then definitely there's going to be a penalty in the cooling operation or requirements of the different facilities. The locality is going to be exposed to the impacts of climate change should be properly identified and allocated for the appropriate use. We will always go for the best, of course, you may access now for the different requirements of the energy facilities. But of course, if they are going to be in the future just be exposed to the many impacts of climate change, then we might as well be advised to consider other areas. In terms of operational requirements, we've read in the newspapers that some of the plants have not been able to provide, or maybe there is a need for us to consider mandating a certain level of fuel inventory. It is definitely going to cost the generators, but I think there's going to be a certain level of inventory that will need to be in place, especially if they are imported. We've done this before in terms of oil, and I think we've mandated as much as 30, 90, even 120 days of inventory in the past. But of course, considering the current situation, the current economics of fuels, then maybe a lower level, and a lower number of days will have to be considered, but nevertheless, increasing the current level of fuel inventory will have to be checked, and a certain level will have to be maintained at all times. Power plants and all the related facilities providing for the different forms of energy or specifically electricity will have to be regularly monitored in terms of their performance, more especially in terms of their efficiency. The department, I think was also mentioned, is able to do a number of services to include even energy audit. But nevertheless, we believe that the private sector is also ready to be able to do the equivalent services, to include even an integrated sort of energy service company, what we call in the past a super ESCO. What we have right now in terms of energy service companies are those who are offering their specific products and services. It may be a boiler company, and therefore providing only the best, the highest efficiency boilers in their set. But for you to be able to access that boiler may be a concern for you or a problem for a certain company. So therefore financing will have to be done. But what we're looking at the super ESCO concept is that one who will not look at just the efficiency improvement in your boiler, but with all the other energy consuming devices and equipment in your facilities. And collectively they evaluate and advise you on what you should be able to do and how you should be able to do it and even fund it. In terms of power rates, I think one of the major reasons why we were not able to have new capacities is, as presented by Bong, is that many of those intending or who propose to actually come in and put up their own power plants, that the rate is not that attractive. And we've also heard that because the current rates are still benchmarked with NPC. NPC, because of asset privatization, has lost much of its capacity. And therefore, the benchmarking with NPC for power rates is no longer true. You'll have to review that aspect. And therefore, we should be able to come up with a more attractive set of pricing for the private sector to be more attractive to come in. Point that we should be able to look at the many issues in the power sector or maybe even in the energy sector on a chain basis. not just on one side of the coin of the equation. And there will always be short-term and long-term solutions. Right now, because of the immediate problems in Mindanao, we may be looking at the short-term solutions, but we should never remove our eyes and our thinking and everything else on make sure that the long-term requirement will always be there and properly evaluated. The department is doing now a number of IEC, as we call it, for the Philippine Energy Plan, where we are presenting the different estimates on the outlook, for the whole energy sector, to include even the power sector requirements. The main point we're trying to say there is, look, because of the energy of the economic, this is going to be the equivalent energy requirement that we need. And years or specifically where additional capacity will be identified. And thus, we're inviting the private sector to consider providing for capacity in the specifying, because that's going to be your choice. The RE law is there, providing for a number of incentives. Consider it. We're also looking at other technologies. If you've been able to attend our IEC, looking at hydrogen and even nuclear. A scenario was put up where we could possibly have these new technologies come in. And the year is 2025. Enough time for us to consider preparing the different related infrastructure for a choice or a decision such as nuclear. But nuclear is not the only option. There are other options. And we ask and we request everyone to also look at the market and the developments elsewhere in the world to help us also identify and consider other technologies. If you are an investor, definitely you will have better access to partners abroad.